And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. Around-the-clock talks in Brussels as clock is ticking toward Brexit. Deal or no deal? Some answers right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei, the program coming to you live from Beijing. We now turn to Brexit impasse. The latest update came from European Council President Donald Tusk, who said on Wednesday that theoretically in 7 to 8 hours everything should be clear. We finally will see a breakthrough with only 2 more weeks until October 31st, the deadline. Well, if that is still a deadline. Before we talk to our panelists, let's take a look at the latest.
The outcome of talks between the EU and British negotiators that lasted all night in Brussels on Tuesday. No deal. The last summit between EU leaders before the October 31 Brexit deadline is set for Thursday. If no agreement is ready to be reviewed by the bloc by then, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson would find it extremely difficult to deliver on his promise of taking Britain out of the EU on schedule, which was reiterated through a speech written by the government that was delivered by the Queen before Parliament on Monday.
My government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October.
On Tuesday, negotiators on both sides said progress was possible, but no details were given. The dilemma regarding what to do with the land border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and Ireland, which is part of the EU, remains the biggest sticking point, referred to as the Irish backstop. The UK's current proposal is to set up a custom border in the Irish Sea and a dual channel system at Northern Ireland's ports and airport, which the EU finds prone to dysfunction and fraud. With no majority in Parliament, Mr. Johnson struggles to find a way to satisfy both the EU and hardline Eurosceptic parties.
Brexit deal, to be or not to be. Besides those in the UK who are concerned about that, we would also have 2 panelists with us who is going to help us with all the latest development. Ian Begg, our longtime supporter of the debate regarding Brexit, at least on our program, professorial research fellow at the European Institute of London School of Economics and Political Science, and also in our Beijing studio, Cui Hongzhen, the director of Department of European Studies, China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to our program, Professor Begg. So, what do you think among all the information that's flooding out every day regarding Brexit? What is the fundamental issues that we should really grasp on right now?
Well, wait, it's half an hour since I left my office, so things may have changed. But as far as we can...
Go ahead.
As far as we can see, what's happening is there's an attempt to agree a deal at the moment. I think it's now taken so long that it's not going to be on the table for the European Council starting tomorrow unless there's some magic solution has just been found. And that means it's very likely that it's going to have to go to a longer period than the end of October. Yeah. I say that under caution because there are all these things going on in the background, and there's such a Brexit fatigue behind all of this. Everybody wants to be done with it, that maybe there'll be one last push in the next few hours to put it on the table for Thursday and Friday.
Despite the fatigue, we're still talking about it because it is really very important. Mr. Cui, despite of its importance though, whether it will become a real discussion this time or be swayed around by other issues. Mr. Cui.
I think now, to some degree, the Brexit itself has become a kind of instrument for some parties in UK. But of course, I think recently, those few hours is so important because it not only will decide the UK will leave from the European Union now or later, it will be decisive that who will take the power in 10th of Downing Street in next months, I think.
Professor Begg, now, of course, the Prime Minister's role and reputation has very much been eroded over the ups and downs over the past few months since he came into the office. how much credibility does he still have?
It depends who you ask, because he has strong credibility with the members of his own. Yeah, but I'm also putting this rhetorically. He has strong credibility with his own party members who are in favour of Brexit. He has lost it with some of the party members, some of whom have been expelled from the party, at least temporarily, who are against Brexit. He is able to attract some of the Labour Party members who believe that Brexit should happen, and they will hold their noses and vote for Boris Johnson's deal. So when you look across the country, you can see that he's gained some and he's lost some. The metaphor that I would give you for this is to think of the children's game of whack-a-mole. I don't know if you're familiar with this one. It's one where you have a big table and a mole will pop up and you hit it on the head and it goes down again. And another one pops up and you have to hit that one down. He's constantly trying to work out who his next opponent is, who he needs to mollify, who he needs to get on board to make things happen. And this is the contest that's been going on for the last 2 or 3 weeks, in which it's very unclear what the end point will be.
As Mr. Begg earlier used the analogy, it has already become a political game, isn't it, Mr. Cui? So whether this is what the British people want when they were voting for that referendum, we do not know. But now, what is the prospect?
I think now something. I think a lot of the things changed a lot. As we know so far, even before the people voted for the referendum, Brexit or not, mostly they don't know what will happen. But now, still, of course, they will not know what will happen. But they know what happened already in the last 3 years. So if we look at the recent poll from the UK, we can find more and more people, they hate the Brexit process itself. Now nearly 35% British people, they even want the Brexit without a deal. So we can find it's just maybe similar the popularity of Mr. Johnson in UK. So we can find now Brexit itself is not important even for the average people. And people to pass over this, pass away from this process, I think now become the majority.
Despite the fatigue, it is very true, Mr. Begg, that everything will change if the Brexit really takes place. A lot of things, whether it's political, economic, trade policy, educational policy, all of this could change and could have an impact on anyone who's dealing with the UK right now. Mr. Begg, so with all these unpredictabilities, what can be done inside the country? How much can still be run, with order? How much do you consider when it comes to the governance is already impossible to work on?
Well, there's 2 answers to that question. The first is that over the last 3 years, Brexit politically has squeezed the space for everything else. Because Brexit has been such a dominant political topic, every other dossier that the politicians would normally be having to deal with have been given the space to develop. And there's a yearning inside the country for us to move on from Brexit. And that means that which is probable within the next few weeks, we have an election, it will be on the usual British topics of healthcare, the economy, what to do with the transport system, the difficulties in care for the elderly, which have manifested themselves over recent years. The other sort of answer is that with Brexit, until it's solved, you can't really move on. And this is why one of the things that Boris Johnson has been so insistent on is saying we must leave on the 31st of October because we need to finish this. Everybody agrees with him. What they don't agree with him on is the manner in which we leave. Now, if we leave with a very bad deal or no deal, it's damaging to the economy, which in turn undercuts the possibilities for having more spending on healthcare. And that's why having a deal is such an important part of this.
Mr. Begg, on the other hand, when the geopolitics is changing so dramatically every day, the UK is relatively absent from some of the issues because of its own chaos. What does that mean? Is it both challenge and probably opportunity as well, some could argue, Mr. Begg?
Well, it will be an opportunity for some, because the law of physics is that if you have a vacuum, something fills it. And we've already seen this with the Russians moving into Turkey and Syria because of the US departure. So there is this law of the vacuum. But I think it's more about where the European Union is able to fit into global affairs in future. The UK will be independent, assuming Brexit happens. And if that's the case, then the UK plus the EU together will probably have less of a weight in global affairs than they did previously. And that is potentially unsettling for the rest of the world, be it China, Russia, United States, or many of the developing areas of the world.
Mr. Cui, how do you think the rest of the world, at least China, is looking at the UK right now? Before Brexit, whether it's deal or no deal Brexit, or a decision of not to have Brexit at all, well, it's really up to the British people to decide. How do you think China would deal with the UK, just as an example?
I think to a large degree, China will join most of the partners with UK to look carefully and closely about the outcomes of Brexit. I think firstly, we should have some short-term, mid-term, or long-term understanding or preparation for any kind of consequences from the Brexit. For example, how about this maybe some uncertainty or instability of the British economy, because we know it's related to the trade and investment, both sides. And secondly, yes, how about the regional situation and also some geopolitical change? For example, what will happen for the whole Europe? I mean, there will be a kind of a new type of relations, just like from British government mentioned that the new type of partnership between UK and the EU. Of course, at the same time, just like Professor Berger mentioned, how about the global level, for example, the greater power scheme. For example, the UK will be more active in NATO, or UK will be more active in some other parts of the world, including Asia, Latin America, even Africa.
Professor Begg, of course, we still do not know the answer that Mr. Cui asked, and also many in the UK keep on asking as to deal or no deal. From now until October the 31st, what are some of the most important steps and dates you would look at, and what would that mean if there is a decision or not before that? What would that mean for the near future? Professor Begg. Once again, I want to ask a fortune-telling question, but I always think you are capable of answering them.
Well, before we get to the fortune-telling, there are three clear dates coming up. One is that there is the European Council meeting over the next 2 days, Thursday and Friday, and that will make a decision on whether there is enough of a basis for putting forward a deal for the UK. If so, then there's already a tentative agreement that the House of Commons will sit unusually on a Saturday, the 19th, and make a decision about whether it accepts the deal that Boris will have brought back from Brussels. If it doesn't accept that, then it's going to impose what's called the Ben law, which requires the Prime Minister to insist on an extension to the process. Whether Boris agrees to that or not, we still don't know, because he's been vacillating. But if he does agree to that, then we will ask for an extension. If there isn't a deal, then there's a possibility that Britain would crash out on the 31st of October. So these are all the dates in the calendar. I think the most likely, since you asked me to speculate, is that there will be an extension to the process. How long that extension will be depends on the motivations of the British side as well as the European side, who don't forget have a say in all of this.
Right.
I think we could be looking at something like a 3 to 6 month delay in Brexit.
Well, I guess for the rest of us, Mr. Cui, we could only wait and see.
Yes, exactly. But of course, I think still some hope for the last-minute decision. Once it happens, I think most of the British people and most of the people in the world will be happy with that outcomes.
All right. I want to thank both of you for helping us understand the latest situation. a lot of smiles and a lot of laughter, but I guess sometimes when we are really nervous about what's going to happen, we do have some kinds of unpredictable laughter, as we demonstrated during today's discussion. But for now, I want to thank you, both of you, Ian Begg, as
always. You need a joke sometimes.
Yeah, it's healthy. It's healthy. And Cui Hongjian as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for helping us understand the latest. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook. And from me, Tian Wei, everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for more insights across China and around the world. Good night.